Okay, so learning English. It can be tough, right? Like you're super excited to be able to talk to all these new people, but then when you actually have to speak, it can feel a little scary, like you're back in school and worried about messing up. But don't worry.
You're definitely not alone.
Oh, good.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. And actually, that's exactly what we're diving into today. This YouTube video from Learning English podcast called I Can Understand English, but I Can't Speak. It's all about facing that fear.
Awesome. So, what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, first off, what I really liked is that the hosts, Leo and Gwen, they start by talking about their own experiences.
Hmm.
Like they admit that they used to be terrified to speak English too,
Hmm.
worried about their pronunciation and grammar and all that.
That's so cool. It makes them seem so much more relatable.
Totally. It's like they're saying, hey, we get it. We've been there.
Yeah.
And look at us now. So it's really reassuring to know that even fluent English speakers had to go through that awkward stage.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense.
And another big takeaway is that they emphasize how mistakes are actually good for you. When you mess up, it forces your brain to pay attention and figure out what went wrong. It's like you're building connections in your brain.
Okay, that's a good way to think about it.
Right. Instead of getting discouraged by mistakes, we should see them as a sign that we're actually learning.
But honestly, sometimes it's hard not to get frustrated, especially with English pronunciation. It can be so inconsistent. The video talks about words like though and through, which sound almost the same but are spelled so differently.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then there's comb and bomb. Like, why is there a silent B in one but not the other?
I know, right? English spelling can be a nightmare. But I think the key is to understand that it's not always straightforward. Once you realize that you can start to anticipate those tricky pronunciations, it becomes less about memorizing every single word and more about recognizing the patterns.
So it's like you're learning to read a map that's a little messed up, but once you get used to it, you can find your way around.
Exactly. And the same goes for grammar. The video talks about some common issues like verb tenses and forgetting the S in the present tense.
Oh, and those articles, a and the they, I still struggle with those sometimes.
Ah, yes, the articles, they can be tricky. But the video actually gives a helpful trick for remembering when to use the, they call it the spotlight effect.
Spotlight effect.
Yeah, so you use the when you're talking about something specific, like something you and the listener are both thinking about. It's like shining a spotlight on that particular thing.
Oh, I get it. So if I say, I saw a dog in the park, it could be any dog. But if I say, the dog was chasing a squirrel, we both know which dog I'm talking about.
Exactly. It's all about context and making it clear what you're referring to.
That's a really helpful way to visualize it.
Right. And even with all the tricks and tips, you're still going to make mistakes. But that's totally fine.
So we've talked about,
The video actually mentions some research from Science Daily that shows that making mistakes is a crucial part of learning anything. It's how our brains strengthen those neural pathways and really learn the correct form.
wow, so instead of feeling bad about making mistakes, we should see them as a sign that our brains are working hard to get it right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about changing our perspective.
That's amazing. I always thought mistakes were like failures, but now I see them as stepping stones.
That's the spirit. And speaking of growth, the video goes beyond language and talks about the cognitive benefits of being multilingual.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that learning a new language is like a workout for your brain. But I'm always curious to know more about what's actually happening in our brains.
Well, research has shown that it can enhance your cognitive flexibility. So your brain becomes more adaptable. It can switch between tasks more easily and see things from different perspectives.
So, learning English is not just about speaking a new language, but also about making my brain sharper.
Yeah, kind of like a mental boot camp.
I like the sound of that.
And to help with those conversations, the video gives you some useful phrases you can start using right away, like get used to, get better at, get the hang of, be terrified of, real life stuff.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate about this show. It gives you practical tools.
Definitely. And it reminds us that the goal isn't just to understand English, but to actually use it to connect with people and share your thoughts and experiences.
I'm feeling so inspired to work on my speaking skills now. This has been really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. But we've covered a lot already. Maybe we should take a little break and come back to explore even more of these tips.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready for more.
Great. We'll pick up right where we left off in part 2.
So before the break, we were talking about how learning English can actually make your brain more powerful. And this video doesn't just stop there. It also gives you a ton of practical advice for improving your speaking skills.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things they really emphasize is the importance of consistency. It's not about like cramming in huge study sessions, but rather finding small moments in your day to practice.
Okay, but honestly, life can get pretty hectic. How am I supposed to find time to practice English when I have work and family and everything else going on?
That's where those little pockets of time come in. Like instead of scrolling through social media, you could switch your phone's language to English,
Oh, that's a good idea.
right? Or you could watch a movie in English with subtitles. You'd be surprised how much you pick up that way.
Actually, I do that sometimes. I find myself repeating lines from movies or TV shows, almost like I'm practicing for a real conversation.
Exactly. And don't forget about podcasts. You can listen to them while you're commuting or doing chores or even working out.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to sneak in some extra practice.
Right. And the video also mentions something as simple as keeping a journal in English.
Hmm. I haven't done that since high school, but I can see how it'd be helpful for improving my writing skills.
Even if it's just a few sentences each day, it can really help you with grammar and vocabulary.
I'm all for expanding my vocabulary. But one thing that always gets me is that fear of making mistakes, especially when I'm talking to native English speakers.
I totally get that. And that's why the video's focus on mindset is so important. It's not about being perfect, but about communicating clearly.
Mm.
And one of their tips that really resonated with me was to embrace your accent.
Embrace my accent.
Yeah, it's part of what makes you unique. Trying to sound exactly like a native speaker can actually make you sound less genuine.
That's a really good point. I never thought of it that way.
And remember, even native English speakers have different accents depending on where they're from. So there's no one right way to sound.
So it's more about getting your message across than sounding perfect.
Exactly. And the video also reminds us that learning English doesn't have to be a lonely journey. There's a whole community of learners out there who are going through the same things.
That's true. They even encourage viewers to connect with each other in the comments section. It's like a virtual support group.
Yeah, it's a great way to stay motivated and share tips and encouragement.
Speaking of support, it makes me think about the importance of finding the right resources. Like, what if you don't have access to in-person classes or language exchange partners?
That's a great question. The video doesn't specifically recommend any resources, but they do talk about the importance of finding methods that work for you, whether it's online apps or podcasts or even just books.
It's like building your own personalized language learning toolkit.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment until you find what works best for you.
This whole conversation has been so inspiring. I'm feeling really motivated to step up my English game.
That's awesome. And remember, it's not about becoming fluent overnight, but about celebrating those small victories along the way.
But what about those times when you hit a wall and feel like you're not making any progress? How do you stay motivated then?
I think that's where that sense of community comes in. Surround yourself with people who are also learning English. Share your struggles and celebrate each other's successes. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
So it's about finding that balance between pushing yourself and being kind to yourself.
That's a great way to put it. And most importantly, remember to have fun with the process. Learning English should be enjoyable, not stressful.
Well said. This deep dive has been so insightful and encouraging. It's a good reminder that learning English is about so much more than just grammar and vocabulary. It's about expanding your world and connecting with others.
I couldn't agree more. It's about opening yourself up to new possibilities.
This has been a fantastic conversation. We've covered so much ground, but there's still more to unpack.
Absolutely. We'll be right back to explore even more tips for overcoming that fear of speaking English and becoming a confident communicator.
Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive. And as we've been talking about all these tips and strategies, I've realized there's something really important that kind of ties everything together.
Oh, I'm curious what's that?
I think it's all about your mindset. Like, you can have all the resources in the world, but if you're approaching speaking English with fear and self-doubt, it's going to be a lot harder.
You're absolutely right. I've seen so many learners who know all the grammar and vocabulary, but they still freeze up when they have to speak because they're so worried about making mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's this little voice in your head saying, you're going to mess up, or your accent is terrible, or people are going to judge you. And those thoughts can really hold you back.
They totally can. If you go into a conversation expecting to fail, you're going to focus on all the negatives and miss out on the actual communication.
So how do we change that mindset? How do we quiet that inner critic and start speaking English with more confidence?
Well, I think it starts with being kind to yourself. Instead of getting upset about every little mistake, try to treat yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend who's learning something new.
That's a really good point. I think we're often way too hard on ourselves, especially when it comes to language learning.
Yeah, we tend to set these impossibly high standards for ourselves. What if we gave ourselves permission to be imperfect, to experiment and play with the language.
I love that. It's like giving yourself permission to be a beginner again, to embrace that sense of curiosity and just have fun with it.
Exactly. And honestly, even if you do make a mistake, most people are going to be understanding. They'll appreciate the effort you're making to communicate with them.
So it's more about connecting with people than speaking perfectly.
That's the key. And when you take the pressure off yourself to be perfect, it actually becomes more enjoyable. You can relax and have fun and even laugh at your mistakes.
That's so true. Laughter is the best medicine, right?
Definitely. It helps us let go of those inhibitions and not take ourselves too seriously. Remember that quote from the video, "It's not about being perfect, it's about enjoying the journey and making progress."
I love that quote. It's a great reminder that learning English is a process. And like any journey, there will be bumps along the way. But if we can embrace those challenges and keep learning, the journey itself becomes the reward.
Well said. And the video ends with a really powerful call to action. It asks, what's one small step you can take today to practice speaking English?
That's such a great question. What's that one step for you? Is it signing up for an online course? Or scheduling a language exchange? Or maybe just committing to speaking English out loud for a few minutes each day?
Whatever it is, just take that first step. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There's a whole community of English learners out there who are ready to support you.
So to everyone listening, we believe in you. You can do this. You can conquer your fear of speaking English and open up a whole new world of possibilities.
Keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep having fun.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into conquering the fear of speaking English. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and found it helpful. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to leave a comment below.
And until next time, happy learning.